You're filming your daughter on the beach. The sun plays in her hair as she laughs, tossing a seashell into the air. You press the button, and that's it. Nothing else happens. No image. No confirmation that the moment is captured. Only emptiness. This is exactly how Edwin Land felt in 1943, when he was vacationing with his family in Santa Fe. After a walk in the desert, he took a picture of his young daughter, Jennifer. She looked up at him with wide eyes and asked, "Daddy, why can't I see the picture now?" The question sounded simple, childlike, but it contained all the pain of the disconnect between humans and technology, between the desire to preserve a moment and the long, cold wait in a dark room where chemicals smelled of ammonia and every minute felt like an eternity. Land didn't answer immediately. He remained silent. But at that very moment, a promise was born in his mind. Not just an engineering solution, but a father's personal duty to his child. A promise that would change not only his life, but the entire history of photography, giving birth to a technology that Kodak and academic chemists considered physically impossible. In 1943, instant photography was considered science fiction. Chemists, engineers, even Land's colleagues, everyone was convinced it was impossible to print a photo in seconds. Photography required a lab, chemicals, a darkroom, and 15 minutes of strict processing. Without that, nothing. But Land didn't just believe in the possibility. He promised his daughter he would do it. And he didn't just promise, he started working. While the whole world thought the idea was crazy, he alone believed that emotion was more important than a formula. That if a child wanted to see a photo now, then technology had to comply, not the other way around. And he did the impossible, not through a single stroke of genius, but through stubbornness, isolation, and faith in a question asked on a desert road. By 1947, he demonstrated a prototype that printed a photo in 60 seconds, not in a lab, but in the user's hands, in the light, without gloves or fear of exposing the film. By the end of this story, you'll understand how a single child's question gave birth to a billion-dollar empire. You'll learn how Land transformed a chemical impossibility into an everyday miracle, creating a miniature chemical factory within each film pack, composed of 27 layers of emulsion, reagents, and titanium rollers, a technology comparable in complexity to early microchips. You'll see how Polaroid became not just a camera, but a symbol of the living moment. By 1977, 1 in 10 Americans owned a Polaroid, despite the fact that a single print cost 10 times more than a regular photo and was disposable. But you'll also learn why this empire collapsed, not due to competition or poor management, but because its founder, once believing in the impossible, later refused to believe in the future. This story isn't just about technology. It's a story about how emotions spark revolutions and how pride destroys them. The dust of the New Mexico road settles on your boots. The sun is already dipping below the horizon, but Jennifer Land is still full of energy. She runs, laughs, asking her father to capture her jump. Edwin pulls out his camera, takes a shot, and at that moment, here's the question that will never leave him. Why can't I see the picture now? It's not a whim, it's genuine bewilderment. A child doesn't understand why they should wait when the moment has already passed. Land looks at his daughter. He sees in her eyes not just curiosity, but a gap between human and machine. And for the first time in his scientific career, he makes a decision not as an engineer, but as a father. He promises, "I will make such a camera." Not, "I'll think about it." Not, "It's difficult." But, "I will do it." Because that question contained the whole essence. Photography should be immediate, like an emotion. And this moment, captured not on film, but in a father's memory, would become the catalyst for one of the most unexpected breakthroughs of the 20th century. Before this moment, photography was perceived as a technical process. It was judged by sharpness, contrast, depth. But Land suddenly realized something more profound. People don't just want an image. They want confirmation, here and now. They want to see a smile while it's still warm, while the echo of laughter still rings in their ears. That's why the traditional darkroom was doomed. It detached the moment from the emotion, turning a living memory into a cold archive. Land performed a paradigm shift. He stopped thinking about chemistry and started thinking about feelings. And it was this pivot from technique to emotion that became the foundation of Polaroid's entire philosophy. Because instant photography isn't a technology, it's an answer to a human need. I want to see this now. And that answer had to be in your hands, not in a lab. Imagine you've taken a picture. Now you need to go into a dark room, put on gloves, mix 3 chemicals, submerge the film, wait 15 minutes until the smell of developer fills the room. Only then do you see the result. In 1943, this was the standard, the only possible way. But Land rejected this entire system. He asked, "Why do you need a lab if you can build it into the photo itself?" It sounded like madness, like suggesting you bake bread inside the grain itself. But that's exactly what he did. He didn't speed up the old process. He invented a new one. Instead of external processing, there was an autonomous chemical reaction, triggered by titanium rollers inside the cartridge. And this was the whole revolution. Photography became immediate, intimate, personal. Emotion became a challenge. The challenge became a mission. But how do you turn a dream into a mechanism? How do you fit a lab into a tiny film pack? How do you make chemistry work in seconds, without a darkroom, without human intervention? It seemed impossible. And yet Edwin Land knew if a child asked a question, an answer must exist. All that remained was to find it. And he began to search. In the quiet of the lab, far from skeptics, in the solitude of a genius who believed not in formulas but in miracles. His laboratory notes from that time are not just technical observations, but almost poetic reflections on time, memory, and the trust between a father and child. A laboratory in Cambridge, 1944. Outside, war. In the air, fear, scarcity, anxiety. But inside, silence. Only the rustle of paper, the click of a pipette, the footsteps of one man. Edwin Land doesn't sleep. He works. So, colleagues have already given up. Chemists laugh, impossible. The reaction can't happen that fast. But Land doesn't argue. He stays silent, and he mixes, and he smears, and he waits. Would you do that? When the whole world says no, and you continue to believe in a child's question? He sleeps on the floor, in his coat, under the light of a desk lamp. Every night, new layers, new mixtures, new failures. But he knows if he stops, he betrays Jennifer. And to betray means to admit that emotion is weaker than a formula, and he has already chosen a side. Not science, not the market, not logic, but the trust of a child who wants to see the photo, now. And then the breakthrough, not a flash, not an epiphany, but stubbornness. 27 layers, thinner than a hair, each with its own role. Emulsion, reagents, pigments, neutralizers, all packed into a cartridge the size of a palm. Inside, a chemical factory. You press the button, and titanium rollers squeeze out a gel, like toothpaste from a tube. It spreads evenly, triggering a chain reaction. The image is born by itself, without a darkroom, without gloves, without waiting. It just appears. In the sun, in your hands. Do you feel it? The warmth of the print, the smell of chemicals. Your heart beats faster, because it's not technology. It's a miracle, wrapped in paper. And the wildest part? This system was more complex than the computers of that era. Imagine in '54, when machines occupied entire floors, a network of 27 layers worked with micron precision in every Polaroid print, a millimeter error, and everything was lost. But Land didn't give up. He knew for that moment. When a child would see their face on paper in 60 seconds, it was worth rewriting the laws of chemistry. Science yielded, not because it was wrong, but because it met something stronger, a father's promise. And in 1947, Land first showed the world a prototype. He didn't explain. He didn't prove. He just pressed the button, waited a minute, and handed over the photo. On it, a smile, warm, alive, real. Look here. This is where the future is born, not in corporate labs, but in the eyes of a child who asks, "Why can't I, now?" November 1948. Boston, Jordan Marsh Department Store. Behind the glass, a crowd. Everyone is waiting. You would have been there too, your heart beating faster. Because today is not just a camera launch, it's a challenge to time. Edwin Land steps forward. In his hands, a leather-bound box with a heavy lens. He lifts it. "This is the Polaroid Land Camera Model 95, he says. His voice is calm, confident. Silence surrounds him. Someone scoffs. Too bulky. Too expensive. Too strange. But Land doesn't explain. He acts. He takes a picture of his assistant, and instead of disappearing into a chemical-filled basement, he pulls a sheet from the camera and places it on the table. Just like that. In the light. Under the gaze of hundreds of eyes. You look at the sheet. Your heart stops. A minute passes. First, a gray smudge. Then, the contours of a face. 60 seconds later, a smile. Clear. Alive. Real. The crowd gasps. The skeptics are silent. Because a miracle doesn't argue. It just happens. The Model 95 was no masterpiece. You wouldn't call it beautiful. It weighed almost a kilogram. The colors were brown, like old newspaper. The picture appeared after a full minute, and it cost 10 times more than a regular photo. But that didn't matter, because you weren't waiting. You were seeing, here, now. And that feeling was stronger than any resolution. Polaroid wasn't selling pixels. It was selling certainty. You captured it. It happened. It's yours. For the first time, photography ceased to be a promise from the future. It became confirmation of the present, and that's why people forgave it everything. Only 57 cameras. On the shelf in the morning, none by noon. Imagine, you go to the store not knowing how it works, simply because you saw a face emerge from paper. No lab, no waiting, just a miracle. And you want to touch it, while it's still warm, before the moment cools. This wasn't a sales launch, it was the launch of a myth. And the myth proved stronger than technology, stronger than logic, stronger than skeptics. And this is where it gets interesting. Polaroid understood, to sell magic, you don't talk about chemistry, you tell stories, about a first kiss, about the birth of a child, about laughter that can't be repeated. They turned the camera into a ritual. Each photo wasn't an image, but an act of presence. You weren't just taking a picture, you were telling the world, I was here, I saw this, I felt this. And that's the secret. Not in the 27 layers, not in the titanium rollers, but in the fact that Polaroid made technology human. Would you have done the same? When the whole world demands clarity, and you choose warmth? There, American suburbia, 1957. Backyard, the lawn still damp from watering. Father pulls out his Polaroid, heavy, in a leather case. Mother adjusts her son's collar. Everyone smiles, as if they know this moment can't be repeated. Click. The camera hums softly. A white sheet slides out of the slot. Father takes it, waving it in the air, as if drying a raindrop. Children crowd around. A minute later, the contours of a face. 10 more seconds. A smile. Alive. Real. No one talks about the price. No one remembers Kodak. They just laugh. Because at that moment, they're not looking at a photo. They're returning to it. This is where Polaroid won. Not in the lab, not on the stock market, but here, in the backyard. Kodak preserved the past. Its photos lay in boxes, waiting for albums, gathering dust in closets. Polaroid brought the present to life. You didn't wait weeks to see your daughter's birthday. You saw it, while the cake hadn't melted, while the laughter hadn't faded. This wasn't an archive. It was a concert ticket, a note from a loved one, an artifact that couldn't be faked because it was born in your hands. Imagine, you pay 10 times more for a photo you can't enlarge, one that will disappear if it falls in a puddle. And yet you pay. Why? Because you're not buying paper. You're buying certainty. This was real. Polaroid didn't sell chemistry. It sold trust in the moment. And that trust was worth more than any resolution. By 1977, 1 in 10 Americans owned a Polaroid. Not because the camera was cheap, but because it did something no one else could. It turned a moment into a ritual. You weren't just pressing a button, you were saying, I was here, I felt this, and that was the magic. But here's the paradox. The stronger this magic became, the blinder its creator grew. Land believed that only what could be touched was real, only what smelled of chemicals and was warm to the touch. He didn't notice how the world began to change, how pixels replaced paper, how screens became mirrors, and when digital came knocking, he turned away. For him, the miracle was only what came out of the camera, not what appeared on a screen. And would you have noticed? If your miracle became someone else's, would you change it or die with it? April 1972. New York. The room is stifling with the smell of expensive cologne and skepticism. Investors await a dry report. Journalists, more technical jargon. But Edwin Land remains silent. He pulls from his pocket not a folder, not graphs, but a thin, shiny case, like a spectacle case, only heavier. He brings it to his eye. Click. A small white square slides out of the slot. He places it on the table. Silence. Only the ticking of a clock. A minute later, color, contrast, a smile, clear, alive. As if it just said, Daddy, look. The room erupts. Some cry, some laugh. Because it's not a camera. It's magic, hidden in a pocket. Would you have frozen too? The SX70 didn't just improve Polaroid, it rewrote the rules. Complex, like a book. 2.5 centimeters thick. Folded, it fit into a jacket pocket. Unfolded, it transformed into a mirror of the moment. The lens, no settings, but sharp, even at arm's length. Inside, a chemical factory of 27 layers. Titanium rollers squeezed out the gel. The image was born by itself, without your hands, without sunlight, without waiting. You press the button, and 60 seconds later you hold. The proof, this was real. It wasn't a tool, it was a ritual. Would you carry one in your pocket? But beneath the brilliance, madness. Every SX70 was assembled by hand. Dozens of hours of adjustment, micron precision. Factories were barely breathing, stocks were falling. And yet, the world went crazy. Andy Warhol photographed Marilyn Monroe with it, calling it the only way to stop time. Architects captured ideas in white squares. Families, their children's first steps. By 1977, 15 million cameras were selling annually. 1 in 10 Americans paid 10 times more for a disposable print. Why? Because the SX70 offered what no one else could. It made the moment tangible. Do you feel it? The warmth of the paper, the smell of chemicals. Your heart beats faster. But in this triumph, the first sign of decline was already hidden. Land had reached the peak. His dream, a camera born from a child's question in the Santa Fe desert, now lay in millions of pockets. But the genius who had once challenged the world now became a wall himself. He didn't see how, in the quiet labs of other companies, pixels began to replace pigments. For him, the miracle was only what came out of the camera, not what flickered on a screen. And when digital knocked on the door, he didn't open it. He closed his eyes. Because for him, the future remained forever chemical. Would you have opened the door? Or would you have also chosen the past? Do you remember that moment? Holding a Polaroid, warm, not yet fully developed, with a faint chemical scent? For Land, it was sacred. Not just a photo, but proof of reality. And in 1981, when a young engineer placed a box of wires and a tiny screen on his desk, Edwin Land didn't even touch it. He simply said, "Photography is chemistry. It's a physical object you hold in your hands. Everything else is not photography." And he left. The prototype went into the archive, and the future passed by. Does that feeling resonate with you? When you believe so strongly in your miracle that you don't notice it aging? For Land, digital was emptiness. No ritual, no warmth, no "I was here," only pixels on glass. But the market was already changing. People wanted the same now, but without film, without waiting, without the smell of ammonia. They wanted to share the moment instantly, not with a neighbor over the fence, but with a friend across the ocean. Land didn't understand this. He chose faith, not evolution. Imagine you create a revolution. You break the rules. You build a chemical factory into a cartridge. And one day, you yourself become that rule. A wall that needs to be broken. The irony? Polaroid itself almost invented digital photography. As early as the 70s, its labs assembled one of the first solid-state sensors, the very same that would later appear in Sony and Canon cameras. But the project was shut down, not because of technology, but because of fear. Because if instantaneity became free, why buy film? And film provided 85% of the company's profits. Would you sacrifice the future for today's profit? This is where the blindness was born, not from stupidity, not from laziness, but from absolute certainty. Land believed that only chemistry could convey emotion. He didn't see the emotion wasn't in the paper. It was in the speed, in the ability to show a mother her child's first step before he fell a second time, in sending a smile, not through mail, but through the air. He created his own blindness. And as the market moved forward, Polaroid remained standing, with a camera in hand, with empty shelves, with billions in archives, and with a question no one asked anymore. Why can't I see the picture now? Because now, everyone could. Just not the way he dreamed. There, 2001, the Polaroid office in Waltham. The lights flicker. Desks are empty. On the walls, faded posters. See it now. The smiles no longer laugh. They just look tired. And outside the window, millions of people are taking selfies. Click. Send. No film. No waiting. No chemical smell. Just a moment in your pocket. In this year, Polaroid declares bankruptcy. The company whose cameras were in 1 out of 10 American homes is now being sold for scrap. The irony? Users still wanted the same thing, instantaneity. Only now it was free. Would you have remained loyal to paper if pixels offered the same but faster? Polaroid didn't fall due to bad technology. Its cameras worked. The problem was in listening. In 1943, Land listened to his daughter and created a product driven by emotion. By the 90s, he was selling a habit, a ritual, nostalgia. But the market wanted speed. Digital didn't come as an enemy. It came as an answer to the same question, why can't I see the picture now? Only without film, without 10 cents a print, without disposability. Users didn't betray Polaroid. They simply found a better way to get what they always wanted. Would you cling to the past if you already held the future in your hands? And here's the paradox. When you apply a Polaroid filter on Instagram, you're following Land's idea. Instantaneity, personality, the warmth of the moment. Only now it's in the cloud, not in an album. Snapchat, stories, even a FaceTime call, all are descendants of that desert road in Santa Fe. The idea survived. The company did not. Because innovation isn't a product, it's flexibility. Would you die for your technology, or would you allow it to reincarnate? Polaroid didn't fall from competition. It fell from belief. Belief that a miracle was only what could be touched. But the world changed the definition of reality. Now it's in the speed of transmission, in the ability to share before the moment cools. Land created a revolution, and then became its museum exhibit. Do you see yourself in this mirror? Thus ends the story of an empire, but not the question. Because beyond the bankruptcy, beyond the patents, beyond the billions, one thing remains. Sometimes it all starts with a single child's why. And if you capture a moment today, whether on your phone or on film, know this: you are answering the same call. I want to see this now. And that desire is stronger than any technology, stronger than any company, stronger than time. There. Edwin Land died in 1991. He didn't see his empire collapse, but if he had, he would have understood. His idea didn't die. It simply shed its skin. Today, Every time you take a selfie and immediately send it to a friend, you are answering the same question Jennifer asked on that Santa Fe desert road. Why can't I now? Only now the answer isn't in chemistry. It's in the cloud. In pixels. In the speed of light. Does this sound familiar? You capture a moment, and a second later, it's with someone else. No film, no smell, no waiting. It's the same thirst, the same ritual. Only the form has changed. The irony is that Land hated screens, but it was screens that made his dream universal, free, eternal. Polaroid has returned, not as a mass product, but as a cult. Young people are buying disposable cameras again, not because it's convenient, but because it's real. You hold the print, it's warm, it's unique. You can't forward it, you can't delete it. And in that, there's the same magic as in 1948. Only now you choose it consciously, as a protest against digital infinity. Would you do that? When the whole world is rushing forward, and you return to paper to feel the moment? The biggest breakthroughs aren't born in labs. They start with questions that adults consider foolish. Why is the sky blue? Why can't I fly? Why can't I see the picture now? Geniuses aren't those who know more. They are those who never stop listening, even when the question comes from a child's mouth. In the Harvard archives, a phrase Land wrote in 1944 while sleeping on the lab floor is preserved. It's not what you know that matters. It's how willing you are to believe in what doesn't yet exist. There. That's the secret. Not in the 27 layers, not in the titanium rollers, but in faith, in a child's question, in a father's promise. Now a question for you. Did Polaroid fall because of Land's stubbornness, or because the world changed too quickly? Who is to blame? The genius who wouldn't let go of his miracle, or time, which waits? For no one? Write in the comments, Land or the world. Look at your phone. You hold in your hands what Land considered emptiness, but it gives you what he dreamed of, instantaneity, presence, proof, here and now. You're not just looking at the past, you're living in its future, and every time you share a moment, you become part of that very chain, from the New Mexico desert to your screen. So who is right? The one who created the miracle or the one who allowed it to change? Choose.